Hey Emily, can you hear me? We're doing a mic check. Can anyone hear me? Doing a mic check?
Yep, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Mhm. Is it heated?
Sorry to
No.
break up your conversation. Can you hear me?
What?
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can, Rich.
Can you hear me
Barely.
now? All right, we will call the Plan Commission meeting to order. It's just 4 of us here so far. Everybody have a chance to read the meeting, or read the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second?
Motion is second to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Let's see, discussion of possible action on a downtown design review certificate for 411 Second Street, Creative Color, Inc.
Thank you, Mayor. In front of you, you guys will find a downtown design review certificate application for 411 Second Street. The business that's going in there will be called 4 Beauty Collective. It'll be like a beauty salon for haircuts and stuff, waxing, all the good stuff. So anyway, the actual thing we're here to discuss is that they are inputting a couple of signs. One's a projecting sign and another is a wall sign. The projecting signs proposed to be 4 square feet in area and will extend 2 feet out from the wall. Per municipal code requirements, this meets all B3 zone regulations. As for the wall sign, that is proposed to be 21 square feet in area, and that'll be on the building's east facade facing Second Street. Per municipal code requirements for the 10% maximum allowance rule, this also is being met. With that being said, staff has found that because it's meeting all these dimensional requirements in B3 zone, that it should be recommended for approval.
I'll move we approve.
Second.
Motion is second to approve. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. Discussion possible action on Riverfront Square concept development plans, preliminary certificate of compliance and preliminary downtown design review at 106 Buckeye Street, Riverfront Properties, Inc.
All right, thank you. This is a project that's kind of, or has been pending for several years now, and now it's at a point where it's moving forward and in front of the Plan Commission. The way I'd like to move forward with this, Mr. Mayor and members of the commission, is that we have the applicant present the concept and the building, and then what I'm going to ask next would be to have Dave Schofield, our consulting engineer for the riverway and floodway related issues, to provide some initial narrative on that process because it is fairly involved. And then once that's wrapped up, I'll go through our staff issue sheet and walk through the specific components of the proposal. So with that, I know the applicant's representative is here. I don't know who wants to speak to it, but they're, okay. 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 And they have it all too, Bruce, in their packets, so.
Is Fred in the room? I can't see.
No.
I am. Castanova's here now.
Oh, Pat's here now.
Hey, Pat.
Aye.
Are we good to go? All right, well, good evening, members, planning commission members. A little background on the project. Basically, the existing structure.
Excuse me. I missed this. Would you identify yourself, please?
Oh, Bruce Lenzen,
Address?
106 Buckeye Street,
Okay,
Hudson,
thanks.
Wisconsin.
You're good.
Good, good.
Yep.
All right. If you're familiar with the site, the existing structure basically is at the end of its useful life, it's pretty debilitated. So the site is located entirely within the floodplain, and we've been working with the city staff throughout this, and we have prepared the required Clover F documents to have the site removed from the floodplain. And once that is done, then we would be able to, upon completion of a retaining wall place and the fill level that would be required there. And then at that point, just prior to that, we we would be able to demolish the site, the existing building, and do the extensive soil corrections that are going to be required on the site. As far as the new structure, the idea for this, for me, became, I traveled to New Orleans because I was looking for river town, something, a building that would be beautiful architecturally, that would fit in with the community of Hudson. I've been in this community for 30 years, and I
Linda,
wanted...
could you come and get the dog?
I thought that was Randy.
Jesus, woman. Sorry.
That's okay. And I desired to put something beautiful here, something that would fit in, and with the French architecture that was so abundant down there, combine that with a little bit of a modern flair, and that was my inspiration for the design of the building. The building is going to house my office spaces for my company, Bruce Benson Design Build, and my design firm. And it represents what I do and what my company does throughout this area and have for many, many years. As far as the overall, it's a 4-story building. The first 2 levels are commercial space, and there will be 2 proposed levels of condominiums. And at this point, after we've gone through all the working with the city, it will be limited to 4 condominiums total. The parking for the condominiums is housed inside the structure. The architectural design is French modern. The stone on the columns and retaining walls that surround the site, it's a brownish gray. And then the main body of the building is a greenish brown stucco color with intermediate detailed cornices. It has Bahama-style decorative awnings. The windows are black with horizontal muntins. And the railing systems and the fence systems are curved black iron. And the structure, the exterior is divided with an intermediate cornice and a top cornice on top of the parapets. To address the landscaping concern that is in your memo, we believe the plan that we've submitted meets the criteria. We actually brought an alternative plan that we took off the trees that we don't, and shrubs that aren't required, but it shows the spacing to meet the 15-foot requirements, minimum requirements. And I'm confident that we can work through with the city staff to get that resolved, because there is space on the site to meet that criteria. In closing, we know that the city has received many letters of support from local businesses, neighbors who support this project. The project meets all the city and DNR ordinances and standards for the riverway that pertain to this site. I would like to thank the city staff for all the hard work to get us to this point. And at the end of it, I believe the structure will appeal to the community, add to the historic charm of this beautiful community of Hudson. Any questions?
Anybody?
I do have one, and it's the commercial part is my concern on that intersection. Bruce, can you tell us what you potentially see in those commercial units as far as traffic concerns?
These are going to be housed the office spaces for the main floor will be my building company offices, part of it, and the other part will be for the interior design firm that we work through. Second floor right now is we're looking at a title company a real estate company who are committed to that second floor.
So really limited traffic.
Very limited traffic.
Okay. Thank you. And it looks like a nice building.
Thank you.
I know you worked hard on that.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mary Claire.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yep, no, thank you, Bruce, for all your hard work on putting this together. Just a couple things. I know you do have some great letters of support. Was there any feedback from the businesses across the street or the staffing agency right there is one question. I noticed in here that there's 7 parking spots that will not be met, and so there's a payment in lieu of parking, but we know that parking is a premium down there, so I'd just like to understand a little bit more about the shortage of 7 spaces. And then thirdly, just the staging of the project. As you know, it's a very tight site, and you have the marina with people going in and out, the sailing school. It's just a very busy intersection as we look at, the potential work on Highway 35. Traffic could be diverted going down that way. So just the question about staging.
Okay, first question again?
Right, if you got any feedback from, this is really close to the sailing school or any of the businesses across the way or the staffing agency or the businesses that are right close to you also?
We know that we have the support of the marina community. Their board, we've worked with them over the last couple of years to every step of the process. We've been keeping them updated, and I know that they're in full support of the project. I was unable to get hold of Mr. Tracy, who owns the property just adjacent.
Okay.
But I believe that there's possibly even a letter of support from him from the earlier. I know that he's personally in favor of it, and he supported us during this process at the, I believe it was Board of Adjustment.
At the neighborhood meeting, Mary Claire, there's
Yeah.
a comment card from Bob Tracy, who owns the property to the east.
Okay, so I just didn't know which property he owned. Okay, great, thank you. So just on the parking, Bruce, as you know, parking is a premium in the area. So losing, not having the 7 and doing the payment in lieu of parking, but what are your thoughts on where guests or those that are on the second floor or where your team will park?
Right now, with the condominiums having their parking provided, right now our team, which is we use the spaces that are there. We have not had any issues. There's also been tenants in the building, so historically, there's not been a parking with the light use of the building, given that it's office space. We haven't had that. We actually are, one additional spot is actually being created because of the design of the building. There's 2 entrances to the property. And so there will actually be an additional parking space that, because of the design on First Street, that is actually going to be added to and I would have to discuss that with Mike to make sure I don't know if we get credit for that against our payment in lieu. That'll just a question that has to be addressed. But we're actually providing an additional public parking spot on the site because of the building design, because we're using all the new condos are all having their own parking spots created inside the building.
And that's in that lift process,
Correct.
correct? Okay.
And then as far as staging, right now there is on the north side of the street, or north side of the building, there's parking spaces along that street, which we would work with the city so that we could use them during the process. And then the back quarter of the lot is where staging will take place. The building itself is going to be prefabricated wall panels and floor panel systems. So when basically when the semis come in, there's enough room on the site with our cranes to be able to have the trucks come in, they unload, set that, and they're gone. So that's how we're planning on staging the site.
I mean, Mike, do you have any questions about the parking or the staging?
I understand that the parking is easy because there's a code that's pretty prescriptive and detailed on how you handle that in the payment in lieu process. So I think that's pretty clear. I have had some conversations with David Gray about, I think it's a little early when we're talking concept plan to really get overly involved in how a construction phasing plan might look.
Okay.
But obviously we're looking at that. We have a project, obviously we're talking, about, the boat ramp, doing that. We've got Highway 35 project, all those things that we're thinking about. And there would certainly need to be some creativity in how we'd address those so that, we don't have our parking for the park down there, Picnic Point being taken up, and that we don't have spillover on, other private lots that might not want that. So, I think that's to be determined, but we aren't to that point yet.
Okay, thank you.
So Bruce, when are you thinking about getting started on this?
Basically, we're hoping for possible demolition once we've received, in talking with Mike, we've kind of done kind of an outline of a game plan here in May, ideally. Once we go through, because the Clomer F has to come back from the approval.
I think Bruce, this is a good segue to have Mr. Schofield chime in and kind of walk us through if you don't mind.
No, that's perfect.
Walk us through.
The Clomer, the floodplain stuff and the process. This is a unique process, right? So before they can go vertical with any building, and Dave will explain it, they have to demo the site, and there has to be certification given by the city or sponsorship effectively to apply to FEMA to certify that it's out of the floodplain. But Dave, I don't want to.
Well, and that's not where I was going. Okay. It's gonna get very congested down there.
Yeah, Mary Claire brought up a very good point of
Yeah,
the construction.
and not
then to
just,
throw the boat ramp on top.
and the boat ramp, yeah. So, I was just curious.
We're just gonna have to, we're planning on working with the city to stage this. We know we have enough from between the parking in front of the building and to the north side of the building. The space to the structure, it's over the curb, but it's enough for trucks to be able to pull in, unload, materials to be brought in, unload concrete trucks. Everything else would be contained on the site. So it's a matter of entering and exiting the site.
That's gonna be a real busy intersection. And not to mention people going in and out of the arena.
Right.
Yeah.
All right,
Dave?
you got a question?
Sorry.
Do you have a timetable on those projects yet?
Well, the highway is gonna be done, Main Street's gonna start in May. The boat launch will start at the end of the summer, sometime.
Assuming grants and.
Yeah, it would probably be a post-Labor Day start.
That'd be another question, Bruce, is once it starts, do you have a build schedule?
It's about a year to build it up because we're doing like I said, the wall panels and things are prefabricated. So the actual structural once we get the foundation, it starts with probably a month of just soil correction after the demo. And then the retaining walls need to be built, which is a singular event. And then the fill being brought in. So and then at that point, once it's all certified that it's at the proper elevations and what have you, the actual structure going up is probably 5 weeks.
like 6 weeks. total.
Yeah,
Wow.
That's probably the heaviest traffic. up
that's,
there.
yeah.
Everything else will be interior.
What, how many, 2 months on on 2nd Street?
Yeah, because it goes in phases, right,
Right.
sections, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
So we would just have to communicate, because we're willing to work with the city on timing. And like, okay, this is what we're seeing, and if there's a traffic change you're gonna need to address. Because the preliminary work and the soil correction, the way it's being done, or proposed to be being done, is actually trucks, there'll be material brought in, but it's actually pounded into the ground to stabilize the soils. It's just a,
Right.
but that's not it's one big piece of equipment and trucks as they need it of the material. But it's a very slow process to do that.
Okay. Dave?
Yeah. So I looked at this for two things. The first of which was NR 118, your Riverway permits. And the building as it is currently proposed is 45 feet tall. That is the maximum allowed under the Riverway. They have met that through the use of the retaining wall that surrounds the building. If not for that retaining wall, they would be too tall and they would not meet your requirements. The one thing I would like to just verify with Bruce is that there is no elevator overrun above the parapet level.
That is correct.
Okay, all right, so that's good. So NR 118 is met. I will say this, there are some things as you go forward as far as signage from the building, or signage to the building, that need to meet the requirements of NR 118, namely that internally lit signs are not visible from the river, that sort of thing. That'll go through your downtown overlay review process. So just know that the signage might come back to you similar to the one that was on the agenda prior to this agenda item. NR 116. So this site, as Bruce mentioned, is in the floodplain. It's in the flood fringe, not the floodway, which is helpful. They are proposing to raise the site out of the floodplain and then construct a building on top of it. These two things are not generally done right back to back, so there's some risks involved here. We've had discussions with Bruce, and I think it's worth at least just mentioning that to the Plan Commission. So they're going to be submitting what's called a Clomer F, conditional letter of map revision based on fill, that says if we build it to this elevation, FEMA will certify, or FEMA will agree that this is no longer in the floodplain. Once that Clomer F is approved, they can go ahead and start construction. They would construct the retaining walls, they would place the fill, and then they would do a certification and a Lomer F. So not a conditional letter of map revision, but an actual letter of map revision. Once that letter of map revision is approved by FEMA, which it should be rubber stamped because they've already gotten the conditional letter, then the applicant can construct vertically. If for some reason the applicant decides to start construction vertically prior to the approval of the Lomer F, and for whatever reason that Lomer F isn't approved, either FEMA doesn't agree with the certification, they in some way didn't build it in accordance with the original Clomer F, that the site would still be in the floodplain, and then they don't meet their requirements for the floodplain, because if you notice on their site plan, we don't have the ability to move people around the south side of the building. I think you may recall, and at least some folks that are on this committee may recall, that the applicant had come forward for a variance for setback to the south property line from the building, so that you could move emergency personnel around all sides of the building. That variance was not approved. They chose to shrink the building a little bit and add these outriggers in, and I don't have a problem with that, but I just want it known for the record here that if for whatever reason, if the building cannot obtain a Lomer F, the building does not meet your floodplain requirements and it cannot be occupied. So there's some risk there. Obviously, the applicant is okay with those risks. They've said that they intend on meeting the requirements of the Lomer F, but there's a risk there. And the city isn't in control of that because it's approved by FEMA. So, but they do, as long as that Lomer F is approved, they are no longer in the floodplain. Then there's, at that point, then they are not subject to NR 116. The other thing I just wanted to verify, and we've had this discussion a couple times, and so this may be repetitive, but the parking structure does not go below the floor, correct?
That is correct.
All right. So does anyone have any questions in regards to the riverway or the floodplain?
Anybody? Okay.
Makes sense. Okay. So I guess I can go into, just some of the relevant code sections that are, detailed in your issue sheet. I think we've done a pretty good job, and Bruce has done an excellent job of explaining what the proposal is and what the building is. So thank you, but, obviously I put some perspective in there. It's obviously, it's a tall building. It maxes out the 45 feet. It maxes out the site entirely, it meets the minimums. From a landscape perspective, you see, obviously, there's some corrections that'll have to be made just in terms of spacing of the overstory trees. We discussed parking. Staff had some concern about the landscaping, especially underneath the building itself. With the overhang where you have, some crab apples and some other things. The applicant submitted us a letter from their nursery and a plan as how they would maintain those landscape features. So I think we're pretty comfortable with that as well. We talked about construction phasing. We talk a little bit about how they handle their trash. And then we get into the downtown overlay district standards from an architectural standpoint, where Bruce's architect put together a response and a little bit of a narrative that you see in there. And Bruce talked about the modern French architecture's type. We included a list of design elements, and code states that you have to meet a sufficient amount of those. We highlighted, at least staff highlighted the ones that we felt were met. In terms of whether or not that's a sufficient amount, I think that's something that the Plan Commission, could discuss. I think it does. It meets, most of those, or a significant amount of those design features. Other than that, we didn't necessarily make a recommendation because I think it is important. We've seen on these applications in the past, especially with, larger type buildings and some of the concerns that have been raised. We've tried to tailor this one just to make sure that, the Plan Commission has all the information, has a good response from the applicant to all of our code considerations and review that we've done. And they have done that. So obviously, there's the consideration if the Plan Commission does wish to recommend approval. I think it's important to note, as Dave said, that this would, normally a concept plan wouldn't go to the Common Council for review, but this one will, because they'll need to see it to approve moving forward with that Clomer. So they would see that the next meeting if the Plan Commission did in fact recommend approval. So with that, are there any questions for staff?
Mike, I just have one more question. This is very clear. So is there a percentage or how much green space is there? And maybe I'm just missing it because I see the two nice, architectural drawings here, but I just don't see the other two sides of the building. So the side that's closest to the marina, you see that entrance there right on First Street, but then to the right of the building closest to the marina, is that surface parking or?
Closest to the marina, no. There's a foot or two of it. It almost maxes out the zero. They have a 0 side yard setback there. That would be on what would be the south side, and then obviously on the east side, you have the access to the parking facility, as well as an ADA space with some green space back there. So they're required to have just over 1,600 square feet of green space. They have 1,624 square feet, so they meet that requirement.
All right, thank you.
Brian?
Thank you. Brian Zeller, 55 Lakeland Shores Road, Lakeland Shores, Minnesota. I'm the managing partner for the River City Center investment group that owns that property and redeveloped it. And I just want to start by saying we're not opposed to seeing redevelopment on this site. We all know each other. It's a small community. We support each other. So I just want to preface, I'm not opposed to it. Having said that, I do have a couple of concerns that have been touched on, and I'd appreciate a little extra time on them. My first thought is, candidly, this is a huge building on a small parcel. If I did my math right, it's about 22,000 plus square feet of building on a 9,100 square foot lot. So you're putting an awful lot of real estate on a small postage stamp. And to put it in perspective, River City Center is 90,000 square feet on 3.7 acres. So this is a quarter the size of River City Center, just trying to put some perspective there. So my primary concern is parking. I've read your code. I understand how it reads. I understand that they're doing their best to comply with that. But according to the staff report, the uses, this building needs 34 parking spaces. Code forgives half of those. So 17 are forgiven. They need 17. They're providing, I believe it's 11, right? 10, and I thought you indicated, I thought you'd found another spot or something. So they're short 6, which I think is still going to create a parking issue. I mean, that's 6 plus 17, that's 23 parking spaces that they're not providing. And frankly, I've got a nice, beautiful parking lot right across the street, and I have a feeling they're going to find their way to my parking lot, like so many others in town. So I think that's a fair concern, that I don't want to inherit anybody else's problem. I want to be a good neighbor, but that needs to be a two-way street. So parking is a concern of mine. I've read your parking ordinance, and I just want to mention that, you know, the payment in lieu, if you look at section F, I think it's an important section. It says, and I'm just going to read the concluding sentence, parking space will be significantly, you would issue payment in lieu if the parking space will be significantly more beneficial for the community and or specific neighborhood. So there are some thresholds that need to be met in order for you to agree to the parking in lieu. And that's obviously just a snippet. It also references the need for a hardship. So I just, at some point, I think you guys really should revisit that. It's too late as it relates to this project, but once you have a parking problem, you're stuck with it. My other primary concern is the staging. Again, this is less than 10,000 square foot lot. I'm assuming that there's going to be multiple semi-tractor trailers, materials coming and going. I'm assuming you're going to need a crane at some point. You're going to have a lot of subcontractor vehicles and heavy equipment, not to mention all the boat trailers and whatnot. So I do think timing is something that should be looked at, and staging is something that's critical. Hindsight being 2020, maybe we wouldn't have finished our parking lot, and we could have, you know, worked together and allowed some heavy vehicles. But a brand new parking lot, I just can't have that type of traffic, not to mention it wasn't designed for that type of traffic at River City Center. So I'm really concerned about the staging portion of it. And then my last question, and maybe Bruce can answer this, there was some discussion of wanting to move the power line to our side of the road, and we're not in favor of that, and I didn't see it in the rendering, so I'm not sure what the plan is to deal with the power line. But again, if you could give just a little extra consideration, we want to be a good neighbor. We want to see the project go forward, but there's some concerns there that I think need to be addressed. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Bruce, you want to answer that, or Ryan, anybody, whoever?
In addressing his question about the power, we're going to, the proposal that we've actually put forward to Excel is to keep the power pole just on a different location, but on our side of the street. And we're going to need to work with the city, with whatever it is, to work out how we're proposing to do that so we can get rid of, there's a big power pole right on the corner, on the southwest corner of the property. That's very unsightly. We're hoping to be able to move that up about 40 feet eastward to take it out of the line of sight of the building, from the front of the building. So we're trying to work with Excel. Unfortunately, that power, where that pole is placed, it feeds that ancillary structure that the city has down the garage there, or the park and rec building, whatever it is, where they do the storage. So power needs to be addressed, and that would be something we're going to try to work through as we go through the project here. That's the plan we came up with when we met with Excel.
So obviously Brian expressed his concern about parking, cars finding their way over into his parking lot. Obviously that's his property concern. We've got a property concern where we've got a park right across the street from there that has, what, 10 maybe parking spots?
Yeah, 10 or 12.
10 or 12.
And it wouldn't take a whole heck of a lot to use up those parking spots for something other than the park.
I just wanted to address, thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor, in response to Mr. Zeller, Brian Zeller's comments. As you mentioned, we all know each other, and I consider him a friend, so I certainly respect his thoughts as being a neighboring business owner, and want to speak to a couple of those items, as well as the parking issue raised by Mr. Mayor. So first regarding...
Ryan, excuse me, identify yourself.
Sorry, Ryan Carey, attorney for the applicant. Thank you for the reminder. On the parking item, just as a quick reminder, this project started off as requesting 6 condo units. We're down to 4. So, and all of the parking for those 4 condo units will be entirely within the building enclosure. So now we're down focusing on parking for some office use. And as we all know, that anybody that goes down in that area, I was in the marina for 10 years, during the weekday, those spaces are almost always readily available. They get busy, certainly more in the summer and weekdays, but obviously more so on the weekend. And so the use, I feel like, is compatible to use the existing parking that's available. And the payment in lieu is designed, of course, to compensate for the fact that they can't provide all the parking. But I feel like that the use of office alone during weekday type of use, again, is not going to unnecessarily burden the parking situation downtown.
So when you talk about unnecessarily burden it, what you're telling me is that you're believing that they will be using those parking spaces over there at the park.
Well, not necessarily. There are public parking spaces on the street in front of the building.
Okay.
And certainly, of course, I suppose from time to time, a space or two over across the public parking next to the park. But there seems to be, at least...
I mean, that's what concerns me more
Sure.
than anything right now, from our perspective representing the city.
Sure.
Is that there aren't a lot of parking spaces for that park, and that's the only access people really have to that park. And that park is, I mean, it's riverfront, right?
Sure.
And that's critical for us.
Tiffany, those spots are labeled parking only, correct?
The ones on street.
The ones on street. You're testing my memory.
Just the ones into the.
I don't think so.
There's a partial of them into the park that are marked as park. There's 2 signs.
Right.
That
Correct.
designate that space. And then there's a couple of spaces beyond that that aren't.
And how do we enforce that? I mean, right now, nobody is parking there.
Correct.
Unless there's an event, I mean, other than people
Unless-
using the park. unless there's an event at the marina, right? There's overflow there. People will park there. It shouldn't be, but they do.
Summertime, to be fair, summertime it does get more use with parents bringing their kids there.
Well, yeah, it's a park.
Sailing school.
That's when the ice is out.
Yep.
But certainly there are other parking spots along First Street, public parking spots, several of them, of course, along First Street as you go down further north. That certainly people that are working there are, and anybody that works downtown is sometimes accustomed to having to walk to their place of business. So the other thing I wanted to mention on the construction side and congestion, Bruce and Rich had the foresight to talk to the marina and negotiate a construction easement. And so they have the ability to utilize some of that space as well during construction. And that's been negotiated and signed as something that is available to them as well. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention, there's been some reference to letters of support submitted. I don't know all of the ones that were submitted. They weren't necessarily submitted through me. The only ones that reached my desk are those of Andy Crone, Pete Foster, Matt Fisher, and Todd Gilbert. And, certainly those are 4 individuals who have a very significant invested interest in the success of downtown. And I just wanted to be noted that, that there are a number of people that are supporting this project, including those 4 individuals. So I think that's certainly relevant to the discussion as well. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, questions? Anybody?
Are you looking for a concept approval tonight?
Yeah, it would be, everything in there is gonna be your concept, preliminary certificate of compliance, and preliminary downtown design review.
Okay.
And moving
I
forward,
would
that
move that
Coloma.
we move forward with the approval of this, but I do want some more time spent on the staging and the parking issue through the staff and this commission.
In addition.
I'd second that.
In addition to the conditions in the issue sheet?
If it's the same and matches within that, yes.
Well, there's 9 issues, Randy, listed there, so you're including those in your motion?
Absolutely.
Very good.
All right, so we got a motion, a second. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. All right, anybody? I've got nothing.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's approved. We stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.